Radio Licensing Act of 1912, if you have a transmitter, it has to be licensed by the government. The government will assign you call letters. The two greatest radio stations are out there, in order.
KMNR.
If you're an operator, you have to pass a test before you can operate the transmitter. The government will allocate frequencies so that not everybody's on the same frequency, which is also a problem with the Titanic, because everybody's on one frequency trying to transmit, they're stepping all over each other. Time limits. Time limits aren't a big thing for us now, but when we talk about, especially about AM radio, time limits become important, because at night it's very different than in daytime. And then the two things here at the bottom, they sort of set the precedent here that airwaves above our country are the property of the people of the country. So if a radio signal is penetrating your house, you can receive it. You don't have to have a license to receive it. You buy or make the equipment, you can legally receive that signal. So anyone can receive, and again, that stands in contrast to some of the European countries where you had to have a license to have a receiver later on. And no content restrictions except fake distress calls, and that's a direct result of the Titanic. No one can go on the air and say, Mayday, Mayday, my plane crashed. If it's fake, you can get in a lot of trouble for that. But from the very beginning, this sort of democracy idea here, anybody can listen to this stuff, and you can say, or you can transmit, no one's really saying much at this point. You can transmit whatever you want. Then we get World War I. Again, this is all still pretty experimental technology. If you were an average everyday Joe, you're not messing around with radio. There are some amateurs that are messing around with it and trying to listen in and things like that. Especially if you're on the coast, you can listen into the ships and stuff. But out here, especially before 1920, very little's going on. World War I plays a big role. It's one thing to sort of develop the technology, but you need people who know how to use it. And that's what you get out of World War I. You get thousands of Navy-trained wireless operators who go out there, who know how to use this equipment, using it for the Navy. Well, when the war's over in 1918, you've got essentially all these well-trained folks who are up to date on the latest technology and they need jobs. So you've got your core group of people now, not just the technology. That's one of the problems, speaking in this building, I see with like, I do this with my students, with like green technology and stuff. We know how to make solar cells and stuff. It's not really that hard. But how many construction contractors have ever installed them? Technology is one thing, having the people who know how to use it is another. So the war's over. Who controls radio? This is important. We're going to go with a government model like the British, where you have a government, essentially chartered corporation, the BBC, which still gets government money in Britain. Not a lot, but some. Or is this going to be totally private? Well, as usual, we figure out our own way to do things. We don't like doing what those crazy Europeans do. We're Americans. We got to do something different. But we kind of feel that radio is too important to just leave completely to private industry. After all, it is the way that we communicate with our ships in the Navy. This is important stuff. So we form the Radio Corporation of America, RCA. Made up of 4 basic parts: General Electric, AT&T, Western Electric, I don't think exists anymore, and the U.S. government. This is a private company, but with U.S. government representatives sitting on its board. And it was a monopoly, as it was set up. A private monopoly with sort of government approval. So it's sort of a hybrid. It's not exactly total private control, but it's not having the government run stuff. We don't really like having the government run stuff. Even if you get something like this, which really isn't all that much else. But up to this point, no one has used that big word up there, broadcasting. They're still thinking about sort of wireless telephone, being able to talk through the air, sending messages like a telegram or something like that. No one really has this broadcasting idea. There's lots of people that sort of claim, oh, we were the first, we were the first, we were the first. It occurs to a bunch of people about the same time. This guy gets most of the credit. David Sarnoff, classic American story of Russian Jewish immigrant, works his way up. Allegedly, according to the autobiography of David Sarnoff, he was the only wireless operator on duty when the Titanic sank, and he was getting all the messages in. We know for a fact that wasn't the case, but it was a good story. He works his way up to become the general manager of RCA, and a long-time president into the 60s. He has this memo at the end of the war. He says, you know, we could build real cheap a small little receiver, called it a radio music box. And people could buy it from us and have it in their homes, and they could listen to music and news and sports and whatever. And we could make money just selling these little boxes. He sends it, before he was general manager, he sent it up the chain, and people were like, yeah, whatever. He was too busy doing everything else to act on it. So he does have the idea. But somebody else actually becomes the first to do something. There's another Rush quote there. Nice. Westinghouse, another big electrical manufacturer, headquartered in Pittsburgh, and not part of RCA, and they're mad about it. They didn't get included. One of their engineers who was messing around with radio at home on his spare time, Frank Conrad, he persuades them to give him literally a little shack on the roof of their factory in East Pittsburgh, where he builds the first commercially licensed radio transmitter, which is KDKA, still exists, goes on the air in November 1920, and that is the official first commercially licensed radio station.